Greetings, everyone. I'm Beth Hayden. I'm here with the fabulous Corinne McKay, and we're here to talk to you about online courses. So I'm
Hi, everyone.
super excited about today. This
Me too.
is going to be a great discussion, and I so enjoy talking with Corinne. She's got so much valuable wisdom to share. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to share my screen and show you a couple quick slides at the beginning here just to go through some admin details. And then we will get into our discussion.
That's what we used to look like when people could go to hairdressers.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking about that as I was getting ready. I'm so desperate for a haircut, so I'm just trying to do the best I can.
I said that to someone the other day when I actually had a different professional photo taken since then, but I said the same thing. Like, that's what I looked like when salons were still open.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so as I said, welcome to Insider Tips for Creating Fast, Simple Online Courses. We're going to have Corinne's journey with us today, how One Solopreneur went from a one-woman blog to an online training platform. I've had the pleasure of watching Corinne go through this career journey that has just been amazing, and I'm delighted to share her story with you guys. And many of you are coming in from Corinne's audience, and you know her from the front end of her training platform, which we're going to talk about, but you may not know the behind the scenes stuff, and that's what we're going to be sharing today. So I'm super excited. Couple of administrative details. There's not a whole lot of slides. It's mostly going to be Corinne and I just discussing her journey and her tips that she has for everybody, but you will get the slides. The webinar is going to be somewhere between about an hour and 75 minutes long, depending on how long we go. If we do share URLs and things like that, I'm going to do my best to be jotting those down as we go along if we give examples and stuff like that. So I'll give those to you later. And then you can open up the chat area to ask questions. If you have something along the way that you really want to ask about, Jessica, our moderator, is here in the chat to help. So you can ask her questions as we go along. So definitely use that chat area. Quick introduction to me. So I'm a copywriter and a content writer, and I help entrepreneurs turn visitors into customers. That's my specialty. And I myself have been offering online training since 2006. And I started doing sort of fast and dirty online courses, similar to the way Corinne started out. We kind of started doing this at the same time. And I've been doing courses on all kinds of online marketing strategies and copywriting and all kinds of things for a really long time. You can find more about me at bethhayden.com. And then our special guest, Corinne, a couple quick things. She's a certified French to English translator and a French interpreter, and she's basically super impressive. She's a rock star. And then she's an award-winning author and blogger. We're going to talk a lot about her blog today and how she uses that to pack her online courses. And she's the founder of Training for Translators, which is an online training platform for freelance translators who want to build their businesses, build their skills, do better marketing, make better use of their time. She has all kinds of offerings that we'll go into. And then she's been doing online training, and I didn't have the exact date, Corinne, but I wanted to say it's at least 15 years that you've been on.
Well, I always say longer than I should have been because I didn't know that much myself when I first started out, but I think you're right about 15 years plus.
Okay, got it. And then here's a fun fact about Corinne and I. So we know each other professionally for a really long time, but how we met was through a new moms group a million years ago. We have kids who are the same age. They're both my kid's 17. I'm assuming Ada is almost going to turn 18.
She's going to be 18 in September.
Yeah,
right?
And when we had brand new babies, I think my son was 3 months old and maybe Ada was about 6 months old. We met through a new moms group. And we ended up dropping the new moms group because we didn't really like the group, but we kept each other. And I'm so glad that we did.
You were by far the best thing I got out of that horrible baby group.
Yes, I completely agree. I don't remember much about it other than that was the way that I met you, which is fabulous. So I think we saw in each other like a kindred spirit because we were both super entrepreneurial even back then, even with new babies and the lack of sleep. And anyway, they say that the women that the families that when you have a newborn and you're going through that lack of sleep, it's like you've been through a war together. That's totally how I feel about about
I know
Corinne. So
if I had ever gone to Navy SEAL boot
yes.
camp, I feel like the bond I would feel with those people is like the bond I feel with you.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. So anyway, that's just a little fun fact about us. We've been friends for much longer than we've been colleagues. And what's great is that we've just been supporting each other through different pivots and what we want to do. And we get together and, we were walking the babies in strollers, trying to figure out like, how do we build an empire? So, all right.
True.
So real quick, I want to know in the chat, and this is the only time I'm going to do a quick poll like this. I'm curious how many of you are coming to this because you've already created online courses and you just want to know how to market them better, or how many of you want to create online courses and just aren't sure how to go about it, and that's why you want to hear Corinne's story. So let me know in the chat. And Jessica, if you would, can you read off a couple of those quick responses for us, or Corinne, if you see it?
Yeah, sure. So the first three people who responded said they want to create them. Actually, more want to create. A few people said they just came because they wanted to see what we had to say. Newbie, never created content, have an online class as a dog trainer. Ooh. And want to know how to better promote it.
Nice.
Yay, I'm an animal fosterer, so go dog trainers.
Yes.
I want to create a course. Okay. I've done online courses, but I'd like to create my own. Okay. Coming because she has lots of ideas, have a course and need help promoting it. So I think the majority of people would like to create something, right. But we've also got some people who have created something but don't really know how to promote it. And the people who are mentioning the specializations that they're thinking about are a lot of really different and interesting things. Nutrition, dog training, teaching English to speakers of other languages. We have the author of Puppies for Dummies.
Fantastic.
I know the translator who translated Sex for Dummies.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Music appreciation.
Oh, wow.
Puppies for Dummies is now in its 4th edition.
Oh, very nice. So, yeah.
I think we've got some people who could be teaching this class, but hopefully we have some tips for you too.
Yes. All right.
No, but that's also, it's because almost the only people I ever talk to are translators and writers. And so it's really interesting to see the other things that people might be considering, like fitness, nutrition, and dog training.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks. That gives me a better sense of kind of where people are coming from. So real quick, here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to be grilling Corinne about her story. And she's apparently fully prepared for this. So we're going to cover the whole story behind how Corinne has built this training platform for translators, how she started out, how she has scaled, how it's become, the thing that it is, and the different parts and pieces of it. Then we're going to, throughout this, we're really going to be covering the biggest mistake that business owners make when they're creating online courses. And I'll give it away right here. There's no big secret. People tend to overcomplicate this process. And so that's going to be one of the main themes that we're touching on today, is that this doesn't actually have to be big and scary, despite what you may have heard in other places. So, and we're going to give lots of tips throughout on how to create your own online courses. And then Corinne's going to give you marketing strategies that help her fill her courses. And then we're going to take your questions at the end so you can grill Corinne. So right there in the Q&A. All right, so let me get into this. We're going to talk about Corinne's story. Because this is going to just be really the two of us talking, what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen. Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's take you all the way back to what, 2006, I believe it was. I want to know how you got started online and what was going on at that point. So talk to me about how this started.
So actually, let's briefly rewind to 2002. So I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in French, and I was a high school French teacher for 8 years before my now almost 18-year-old daughter was born. And when she was born, I thought to myself, what is a job where I could work from home and use French? And so I started a business as a freelance translator in 2002. And I was very confident about the language aspects of the work, about actually doing the translations. But I knew nothing, literally nothing, about running a freelance business. I had never been self-employed before. I was not, you talk to some people who are successful entrepreneurs as adults, and they're like, I had every kid in the neighborhood working for my lawn mowing business by the time I was 14. That wasn't me. I was a book nerd.
Same.
Right. Right. I was a book nerd. And so I was not one of those people who was a natural entrepreneur. And I really, at that time, I feel like freelancing was as a what we would now call a solopreneur was much less developed than it is now. I mean, now it's sort of like, how do you filter through all of the educational content that there is out there for people who want to be freelancers? And at that time, I mean, the example I always give, so I'm sure you've heard this before, the first translation job I ever did, when the client said, send us your invoice, I actually called my husband at work and said, what do I do?
Yeah.
Like type up an email and say, pay me $75? Like, I mean, right. I mean, now it sounds laughable, but I try to remember that when people ask me similar questions.
Yeah.
So I theorize that if I had beaten my head against this wall, I mean, why I say that I started before I should have is because I believe I had only been freelancing for about 3 years when I started the first class. And now I wish that I still had all the documentation from that class, because I don't even know, did the term online course exist in 2005, or did I maybe call it an email class?
Yeah. I thought
So
you called
what
it
I
an
did,
e-course at that time.
I
Is
think
that how?
e-course maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I
Or
did,
correspondence course.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
right. So it basically was like an old-fashioned correspondence course, but over email. And so I basically wrote up, in those days, all the material was in writing. I wrote up 4 lessons with 4 homework assignments that went with them. And then every week we did a conference call, which even like recording conference calls and then sending a link out was pretty cutting edge technology in 2005. So I would email people. It was called, which it is still called today, Getting Started as a Freelance Translator. And so I started out in, I believe it was 2005 doing that.
Okay.
So that was the sort of very beginning.
Okay. Got it. And you've been freelancing as a translator at that point for 3 years.
Since, yeah, right. So
Okay.
I've been freelancing as a translator for 3 years. But I think the key there, I mean, it sounds kind of horrifying, like taking a class from someone who had only been freelancing for 3 years.
No.
But I think the point was, and that's like one of the points that I'd like to make to all of the participants today, is that if you give really practical information based on things that you have struggled with, then I think people need that sort of information no matter what level you are at. So for example, since one of our attendees does dog training, that even, that if you did a very short online course on, if you're going to do training with your dog for 15 minutes a day, here's what you should do. That I think all of us have sort of imposter syndrome about, there are all of these people who are so much more qualified than me. But when you think of the things like me struggling with what to put on an invoice, that I actually think the reason that the course was successful from the start is because I was, instead of coming from the sort of theoretical perspective, or here's the ideal of what you should be doing, to say, here are things I struggled with, how to write a translation targeted resume when you have very little experience, how to market to translation agencies when you have no contacts in the industry, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think that's why the course was successful. And really the class that I teach today is just the, 20th, 21st century evolution of that class. It really hasn't changed that much.
Yeah. And that's still one of your foundation courses, if I'm correct.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, correct.
That's probably one of your biggest offerings. How many times a year do you offer that now?
So the model that I've used, and again, I'm not sure whether people who are in the session today are thinking that they might want to do like a one-time webinar, a masterclass, a 4-week course, but here's what I do. So I tried to think sort of, what are the major topics that a lot of freelance translators are interested in? And I won't bog you down with what those are, but for your area, whether it's, writing or nutrition or dog training, think, what are the big topics that almost everyone is interested in? And an obvious one would be getting started, some sort of fundamentals course. And so that is, I teach 4-week courses around those big topics. So I charge $365 for those, and I take between 10 and 15 students, depending on, the topic and how many people sign up and how much energy I have. And you probably teach those foundational courses each about 3 times a year. And at the start, for a long time, that's all I had was those foundational courses. But I think the thing, that I sort of stumbled into was the knowledge that people will pay real money for really good information and, most importantly, personal attention. That I think if I was going to give people, when you think like you see so many courses out there, say if you go on Udemy, you see so many courses that are $17. I mean, an expensive course on Udemy would be like $99. How do I get people to pay? With discounts, they pay between $335 and $365 is because I sell the fact that it's practical information, and moreover, that it's one-on-one attention from an expert instructor.
Let me
instead of...
Let me interrupt you there. Sorry. Because
sure.
I promised myself that I wouldn't jump ahead in my questions, and I just did anyway. So sorry, I'm not going to let you finish your thought. I want to go back to that original correspondence course and walk people through how that's evolved, because it's so impressive now. I mean, and it was then. It was watching you do this. But what I want to talk about is how the journey, like how you ended up with a suite of courses and things like that. Tell us what it looked like with that first course, because you were offering that personal touch right from the beginning. So I'm sorry I interrupted you, but
no, please, that's what we're here for.
Tell me how that looked with that very first course, because I remember there was quite a bit of hands-on attention from you even way back then.
Yep, correct. So in that first course, I would let's say I email everybody, and I do remember that for the very first few sessions of that, I advertised it on Google AdWords, and I actually had pretty good luck with that at the start. So when one thing I will tell people, and I know we're sort of, jumping around and kind of throwing everything at people at once, but one thing I will say is start building an email list from the start. Because I saw at the beginning someone was asking about, what do I post on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, stuff like that. Remember, all of those ancillary platforms, their whole business model is that you don't own that, right? The only way you have to contact, you could have a Facebook group with 8,000 people in it, and the only way Facebook will ever give you to contact those people is via Facebook. So you want to start building. It is really, really, really important to start building an email list from the start. So I don't know. I use MailChimp. What do you use, Beth?
Now I'm on ConvertKit. I was on Infusionsoft for a really long time, and when I started out, I used a platform that's no longer around. But that's one of the fundamentals of what I teach with copywriting and online marketing for sure. But at the beginning, I had totally forgotten that you were using Google Ads for that at the beginning.
So believe it or not, I found some of the original students for that class through Google AdWords. So I promoted it through a couple translators associations that I was in, and then I also did a sort of small scale Google AdWords campaign. So I would email everyone just using a email group, not using MailChimp, or those didn't exist then. Using an email group, I would send it out and say, read this material and do the homework assignment and email me back your homework assignment. So for example, the first lesson is always how to write a translation targeted resume. So they would send me their resume and I would go over it, as if it were my own, resume. So I think rather than what is really helpful to a lot of people is not just theoretical information about how do I do this, but an expert instructor saying, I'm going to go over your materials. So for example, sorry to keep going back to the dog training example.
It's a good one.
You have lots of people who think, I watch all these YouTube videos, but the dogs don't act like my dog does. Like I can't even get to step 1 because my dog does this weird thing before we even start the lesson on, we're trying to teach the dog sit. But there's a million YouTube videos that are on how to teach your dog to sit, but I can't do them because my dog behaves totally differently from the, docile, compliant dogs. So but what if you had an instructor who said, you're going to send me videos of you and your dog, trying to do the sit behavior.
Yep.
And then the expert instructor is going to say, you're leaning over the dog, and it gives a lot of dogs anxiety that there's this large person, above them,
Right.
or like, I can tell from your body language that you're nervous, and that's being communicated to the dog. So maybe have a friend try it,
Right.
So I think that's another thing that I would stress is I feel like you can't compete with just a lot of theoretical information that is difficult for people to apply. People don't want to pay a lot of money for that.
Right. Right.
And what people are willing to pay real money for is to say, I'm going to go over your resume and say, change this, change this, change this, change this, do a new version and send it back to me. And we're going to look at it again, and we're going to go over it until it's good to go to send out to your potential clients.
Yeah, that's huge. And that amount of hand-holding was built in right from the beginning. Years ago, I had somebody tell me, an accountant or something like that, tell me never underestimate the amount of hand-holding that people need, and they will pay for it. So so that was baked in like right from the beginning.
Right. Yeah. So that I would say now that I've expanded to classes that are taught by other people, that is the sort of core of my online training business is personal attention from an expert instructor. And so I feel like now that so iteration 1 was like old-fashioned correspondence course via email. I would just send out the lessons, people email back the homework, and then we would do a 1-hour question and answer conference call.
And it was on
every week.
It was on a set schedule. Like it happened over like 4 weeks. You gave them an assignment, you gave them deadlines, that kind of stuff.
And I have not had great success with self-paced start anytime courses. And same thing with pre-recorded webinars. I have not had a great success with pre-recorded webinars. I think the immediacy, even though people feel like, I could just watch the recordings, that I actually think that the live, of course I provide recordings because not everyone can come to all the live sessions, but I think the live element really attracts people. And I personally have not, when people say like, oh, you can have this cash machine on your website by having a pre-recorded course and people pay $199 and sign up whenever they want. If that works for people, great. If that works with maybe it's that translators aren't into that. I don't know.
No, there's lots of people who aren't into that. I'm with you.
I have not had great success with pre-recorded or self-paced stuff. I think that start date and the and I think also if you want to have a suite of classes, you need repeat customers. And people might pay one time for a course that they never follow through with, but they're not going to pay 4 times for a course they never follow through with. And I have, like, now when I look at my mailing list, I have people who have taken 4 to 7 courses with me. And I think, having someone who has taken 7 courses with you, it's because they're getting a lot of benefit out of it. And, when you read these statistics, like, I think this was a couple years ago, but that I read something about a third of people who buy classes on the large online training platforms, paying classes on a platform like Udemy or before lynda.com was integrated into LinkedIn, a third of people never even log in after they pay for the course.
So the amount of people that are completing the course is minuscule.
Is zero, right? I don't want to say zero,
but it's small.
If a third of people pay for the course and never even log in, and I think that if you want to create a sort of suite or an online training platform for people in your industry, people have to be getting a lot out of the classes, because they're not going to take 4 classes with you if they're constantly like, I paid $200 and then I never watched the stuff.
And I might add, right away, if I remember correctly, you started getting testimonials from people who were like, Corinne's awesome class and the way she helped me revamp my resume got me jobs, and I was able to start a career as a freelance translator. So from a marketing perspective, that is hugely powerful to start getting that right away. And you don't get that if nobody does the course.
Well, and I think too, and this sounds really basic, but I'll say it anyway, really good information sells itself. Like, I just feel like also there's way too many people out there selling a course that's basically like how to make a lot of money without working really hard. I mean, whatever industry they're in and whatever the actual course title is, that the
Yeah.
substance of it is,
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you how to become like a gazillionaire. You know, and I'm sorry, like even Tim Ferriss doesn't work 4 hours a week.
No, he doesn't.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, if
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I actually think that, like, you know, even the guy who wrote the 4 Hour Work Week
Yeah.
doesn't only work 4 hours a week. And so
Exactly.
instead of
Yeah.
offering a course that's like, you know, how to make a ton of money without working really hard,
Yeah.
I feel like offering something that teaches people an immediately applicable skill.
Yeah.
And that the way your business really builds on itself is that they then give you this feedback. I mean, for me, the best testimonials I get are when people say, I noticed an improvement in whatever the skill was that the class was teaching before the course even ended.
Yes.
You know,
Huge
like
testimonial.
I noticed that I was
Yeah.
more effective at editing my own translations. You know, so I have another instructor teaches for me a course on editing your own translations, which is, you know, again, like niche thing that only translators care about. But the point being that when someone gives me a testimonial and says, I noticed that I was more effective at editing my own work before the class even ended.
Yeah.
You know, I took the legal translation class and I noticed that before the course was even over, I was more confident about this complicated legal translation class that I was working on. So I feel like, you know, focusing on higher quality offerings taught to a smaller number of people with more individual feedback is, to me, something that if you want, I mean, if you just want to do a one-time webinar and make it free or charge $19, you go for it. Like, I'm not here to stop you. But what I'm talking about is this has now grown to about half of my income. So I make almost exactly 6 figures every year. My income isn't going up and it isn't going down. But it's amounted to almost exactly half of my income. And I feel like the constraint is my time and energy, not demand. You know, like, for example, I'm running 3 classes right now and they're all sold out. So I feel like the real constraint is my time and energy, not the demand. And the way for you guys who are interested in building a sort of suite, SUITE. It could also be SWEET. But that's where you really want to think of, how do I get repeat business? How do I get glowing testimonials? And how do I not be just another one of another thing that people are like, well, I never followed through, but it was only $40, so whatever.
Exactly. Well, you know? And what's amazing about the way that you always have done your offerings is that they're incredibly specific. How to get started as a freelance translator, it speaks to a small portion of an audience, but it's a large enough audience that you can get traction with it. But there's a lot of people who want that, but you're offering something super specific. You're not like how to start a side hustle. It's just like this particular piece. If you have language skills and you want to use them to start your own business in this way, this is how you do it.
So I saw that Marie just asked in the chat about self-paced versus live. So Marie, I think I don't know what your industry is, Marie, but I really have not had a whole lot of luck getting large numbers of people to sign up for self-paced offerings. And so I think and you also want to think as well about what sort of income potential are you looking for from this? And how do you generate that income potential when you look at the ratio of number of students to cost? So for example, you know, if I charge, if an average person is paying $350 for a course and I take 15 people, that's, $4,000 and something dollars, depending on, discounts and things like that. So I could make it that way. But then, for example, I recently did a 3-hour masterclass. So it was on marketing to direct clients, a very specific thing that a lot of translators are thinking about right now. And Sarah, a self-paced offering is where the thing is like, you go on Beth's website and it says, purchase my online course on the fundamentals or how to write a long form sales letter. You should actually teach that class, Beth. There's an idea for you. Yeah. So let's say Beth says, I have a course on how to write a long form sales letter. Click here to start. And you start it right that second at your desk. Yeah. So Sarah, that's what a self-paced offering is that everything is pre-recorded and you can sign up at 3 a.m. on a Thursday if you want to and do and sit there for 8 hours and do all the course materials.
Yeah.
So my courses aren't like that. They're at specific times, and I do have recordings provided because I also have some students that are in time zones where they can't participate live.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you want to think of, I mean, it's also worth thinking at the outset, why are you doing this? I mean, one of my goals from the start was to make money.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and if you want to make money, then I think you also need to think, like realistically, if I teach something for $75, am I going to get 60 people to sign up?
Right.
I can now because I have 2,500 people on my email list. Right. But at the outset, I was much better off focusing on 10 people paying $350 because I didn't have 2,500 people.
Exactly.
I had like 150 people
and
on my email list.
You didn't have the marketing engine that you have now. So let's talk about that actually. And I just want to briefly touch on the blog because I know I could ask you questions all day about your blogging success because watching you do that, I mean, you've been a total rock star in the blogging world, and I know it's such a foundational piece for you. So let's talk about that. You've been running the course, the Getting Started as a Freelance Translator, as a correspondence course, basically via email for, if I remember correctly, it was about a year or two. And then you were kind enough to take one of my very, very early blogging classes. I taught this basics of blogging class. And I needed warm bodies to fill the course. Basically.
It was in person.
Yeah.
So speaking of what life was like at the dawn of time. So right in 2008, and give yourself a little more credit here, Beth, because really, like when I say I would not be where I am today if it weren't for you, it's true. Because in 2008, Beth was what we would now call a social media consultant. Beth was like the OG social media consultant and was teaching an in-person course, like in a rented conference room about, Boulder, about blogging, and needed people to fill up the class. And I just thought, or to participate in the class. And I was like, okay, I'll go and see what this whole thing is about. It never crossed my mind that I would do this for myself.
You're kidding. I didn't know that. I'm not sure I knew that.
No, it never crossed my mind that I would do this for myself.
You went as a favor to me, basically? Or because you were sort of vaguely curious?
No, because I was curious about what it was. Like, what's this whole blogging thing, about? And
at that point, blogging was new,
Right.
And people weren't necessarily familiar with how to use them for marketing. So it was very cutting edge at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So I went to your in-person class, and there I thought, maybe it would be sort of interesting to blog about my life as a freelance translator. Now, the thing that I will say, the advantage I had that people don't, so I started a blog that was at that time called Thoughts on Translation, and that has now been integrated into my main website, Training for Translators. And there's about 800 posts on that blog now, most by me, but also when I have the energy, I recruit guest authors to do guest posts. Those are actually a lot more popular than what I write, but people are tired of me after 800 posts. But the advantage that I had that people don't have now is you could just yammer on about your life as a freelance translator, and people would flock to read that because the whole idea of blogging and being able to comment was so new that instead of, writing a letter to the editor, that you could actually comment on the person's blog and maybe they would even respond.
Huge.
This was a whole new thing. So I started, Thoughts on Translation in February of 2008. And so that has now become by far the biggest marketing engine for my books and online courses. But the thing I want to emphasize there is, first of all, now you have to have a niche. You can't just talk about my life as a copywriter, my life as a, nutrition consultant, and have people come read that. You have to have a niche. And content marketing is a highly effective, slow burning strategy.
Totally.
So I think, for me, it has been, Monica asked, what platform do I use? WordPress.
Right.
So I started out, sorry.
Right from the beginning?
Because you taught me how to do that.
It's a really long time ago. Yeah.
You made me get my own domain name. So I bought thoughtsontranslation.com, but you taught me how to use the basic features of WordPress. I use the free version of WordPress, but with my, you made me at the start get my own domain because you told me it looked unprofessional for it to be thoughtsontranslation.wordpress.com.
Bossy, seriously. Yeah.
So I bought the domain name. And so to Monica's question, I still use WordPress, but now it's a much more full-featured website that I paid a designer to create, not just a simple WordPress blog. But those are the two things I would emphasize is the vast majority still to this day, like people think email and blogs, that's like from 1999. Well, it feels that way now, but I will tell you and again, always be asking yourself, why am I doing this? What's my point? Part of my point is to make money.
Right.
And the way that I attract and retain people who will pay money to take classes with me or buy books is the vast majority of the time they find my blog and they sign up to my email list.
And you find your blog through search engines, or how are they finding you?
One thing is now, posts from my blog will get reposted a lot of other places. So people will say, like I saw it on the American Translators Association list for Spanish translators. But I think also a lot of people, something they Google about how to be a freelance translator leads them to a post on my blog. So when I say about like the 800 posts on my blog, I think that's how that generates a lot of traffic, is that people find it through some sort of Google search.
But let it be said, you don't need 800 posts to start pulling in search engine traffic. I have a client who has 10 really good blog posts on his site about something very specific. It's SEO for building materials manufacturing. You talk about specific, but it's like
holy cow.
Door and window manufacturers, folks like that.
Right.
And so that's his niche. And he pulls in a ton of traffic from those posts because they want information that's specific. So if you hear 800 posts and you freak out, you don't need that many. So if you're listening, like start small, work your way up. But the important part is that Corinne's posts have been really good quality. She undersells herself, but they've been very good quality right from the beginning. She puts care into it. She puts time into it. She doesn't just slap up, a 300-word post just to put something out. You've always been very.
And I write all of them. I write all of them myself. Like I think that's another mistake people make is that I can tell when people are hiring someone on Upwork, to write and giving them a bunch of bullet points and stuff like that. I write all of them myself. And I think too, people have a sort of insatiable desire to see under the hood of other people's freelance businesses.
Absolutely.
So or under the hood of whatever you do, that I just feel like the more detailed, it's like, I'm not at all like an oversharer of a person, but I would say I don't like overshare about my business, but I will say to blog readers, I will talk about literally anything except the names of my specific clients. You can ask how much I earn. You can ask how much I charge for specific projects, how I find specific clients. And so,
for example,
can I answer?
I remember if I remember correctly, you were blogging about using a treadmill desk. That was an experiment that you were doing. And I know you're not doing that anymore, but you were actually walking on a treadmill and experimenting with what that was like. And you were writing about it on your blog, and people liked it. Like they like that behind the scenes stuff. You were going to answer a question.
Oh, I was going to answer a couple questions from the chat here. Sarah wanted to know, do I search SEO keywords and what's trending before I sit down to blog? I have no strategy whatsoever.
Oh my God.
I'll be totally honest about that, because again, I think another thing I would emphasize to all of you guys who are here is less overthinking, more doing.
Absolutely.
It's like I always say to my translation students, the kind of marketing that works is the kind of marketing you do, not the kind that you only think about, and certainly not the kind you talk yourself out of before you even do it because you think it won't be effective.
I should say,
You
though,
know,
one of the reasons you're so effective with your blogging is that you know your audience really well. Like you get it, you
right,
know, maybe you don't do any keyword research, but what you do is sit
right,
down and say, well, what
right.
can I blog about that people are actually, what do they care about? How can I be
Yeah,
useful? So,
right.
and that
So
has worked.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That actually, I'm pretty active on translator social media, so I know
Yeah.
sort of the concerns of, what are the like trending
Yeah.
concerns. And one thing I will say too is like, um, I don't want to throw under the bus or say anything negative about people who don't do their actual job anymore. They just teach other people how to do it.
Yeah.
So for an example would be like a lot of you probably follow Ed Gandia. I
Mhm.
love his he's a, sort of the guru of warm email marketing,
Yeah.
and hosts a podcast called High Income Business Writing that I listen to every episode.
Mm.
But he's pretty open about the fact
Yeah.
that he doesn't do content writing anymore.
Yeah.
He only teaches and consults.
Right.
So I think one thing that an advantage, I personally feel like for me, it's a huge advantage that I still earn at least 50% of my income from being a translator and interpreter. And for example, when someone says to me, how has your work been affected by the coronavirus pandemic?
Yep.
I can give a really detailed answer to that rather than saying, well, here's what I hear from other people.
Exactly.
So
That's
to Sarah's
important.
question,
Yeah.
I do no strategic research whatsoever. Like I use Yoast SEO very, very grudgingly as a plugin on my blog, but I always feel resentful because it thinks my sentences are long and wordy,
Me
which they
too.
are.
Me
So
too.
it always gives me a very poor readability
Right.
rating.
Right. Me too.
um,
Yeah.
so
But
I
you are doing your own research though, because you're in Facebook
right.
looking for those
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
You're just not researching the SEO keywords. And I think that's
Right.
completely fine. And it has obviously worked for you because you're getting all kinds
Right.
of SEO traffic anyway. So it has
Yeah.
worked, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me read one thing from the chat that Eve, who's another really good real life friend of mine, posted, because this is exactly right.
Yeah.
So she says, concerning content creation for the courses you create where you give personal attention, it seems that you can reuse the framework of the course
Yeah.
so that once it's created, you can reuse it and save some time there, but then more time goes to the personal attention you provide to each person during each iteration of the course.
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's
Right.
great.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have this
Yeah.
overhead of building the course,
Yeah.
but then my personal choice and what I find that at least translators are willing to pay what I think of as a, fairly, there's so many like, $89 courses on the internet, like that translators are willing to pay almost $400 for, is that highly
Yeah.
personal attention.
So let's talk about it. So I could go on all day about this, and I want to make sure we get to the marketing stuff at the end to talk about how you market and your very specific email style.
Cut me
So,
off.
yeah, no. It's all really useful. I just wish we had 2 hours to chat.
No
So,
kidding.
let's talk briefly about how it morphed from doing basically a correspondence course over email into what you have today. Because right now,
Yep.
I'll give everybody the really brief preview. It's all online. It's all live. You have a suite
Yep.
of courses that you offer during the year. You have guest instructors,
Correct.
and it's all done online using tools that are not super expensive. You do it in a super fast and light way, which I think is great.
Yep.
So tell me about the transformation of that and how it turned into what it is today, and tech tools in particular, like, because there's lots of people asking about tools and platforms.
Sure.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So so the courses continued on as we described from about 2005 until really like 2017. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy, but for basically 12 years, I kept using, So I started in 2005, it was the correspondence model. And then in about 2012, I paid a web developer to do what we used to call ScreenFlow videos. So it was a PowerPoint that ran as a video with an overlay of me talking. And I added those. So that replaced, whereas I used to email people the written printed documents, like read this chapter and do the homework assignment, I replaced those with videos. So that was upgrade 1. But at that time, stuff like Zoom didn't exist, and I had to pay a web designer. I emailed him the PowerPoints and I recorded myself with a microphone. I didn't even yet have a smartphone then.
Okay.
So I recorded myself with a microphone, doing the audio narration, and I would have to, tell him where to advance the slides. And so I replaced the printed documents with videos that I would host on my own website.
Okay.
So one thing people should know is I have never used any, and I still to this day don't use any sort of online learning platform. So I don't use Teachable or Zippy courses or even WordPress courseware. I don't use any of those things. And whether that's a good decision or a bad decision, all I can really say is like, it works for me. Well, and it works for my students.
Yeah, and people add that at the beginning before they have a single course, and that is the number one mistake that I see people who want to create online courses make. They automatically think, oh, I need to set up a Teachable account, and I need to have modules
for $100 a month.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that you did it was the complete opposite, where it was like, let's do this the fastest, lightest way we can, so we can get this information into people's hands. So I just want to say to everybody, you do not need that. You don't.
So
need
when we talk about fast and simple, I would not, if I were someone on this class. Oh, Aaliyah asked, how do people pay? PayPal buttons on my website. So I use a WordPress plugin called WooCommerce. It's just WOO. Commerce is probably one of the more popular, online commerce plugins for WordPress. So I use WooCommerce, and then it just connects to PayPal, and they pay by credit card. People love to complain about PayPal. I actually like PayPal a lot.
So do I.
PayPal doesn't really bother me.
Yeah.
And I find students like it because they don't have to enter their actual credit card information into my website. I find people are really pretty receptive to PayPal.
Yeah, agreed.
So so one thing for people to know is I have never used an online learning platform, and I think for my audience, that makes the courses look more approachable. Like for some other audience, that might look sort of slapdash and low tech, but you have to know who you're selling to. And for my audience, they think, okay, I can do this. All I have to do is know how to use email and Zoom. And the majority of people can use email and Zoom, whereas I have actually had people tell me, I took this really great, literary translation course or whatever, but I dropped out of it because I couldn't stand the platform. Like I couldn't figure out where things were. I couldn't follow the discussions. So what I use now is I literally just email people from an email group that I make in my own email program. That's how I email them the, reminder that tomorrow is a live session. Here's a link. I'll send out the recording. We do the live sessions on Zoom and I record them. And again, like Zoom has, its issues that we've all heard about recently, but I find it's very stable. It's not super expensive. I recently taught a massive course that had 900 participants. And so I upped to the Zoom large meeting feature that lets you have 500 participants in one course. And it was still in one session. It was very stable. We had no problems whatsoever. And all people have to do is click a link. They don't have to create an account. They don't have to log in. And I just think in the world of tech overload, and especially if your participants trend older and more conservative, which translators do, you want to think about that those tech things can, people just saying like, I couldn't log in, so I gave up. Well, that seems stupid and counterproductive to someone who is quite tech savvy. But I've had a lot of people tell me that they really appreciate that my courses are so low tech. Like literally, if you can read an email and click a link, you can take my class.
So when did you move to this live model? So you were doing for a while, you had your pre-recording classes that you sent out using the same model. It's like, I'm going to give you this thing every week, and I'm going to give you an assignment.
So then in 2017, I thought, okay, I want to try to expand this into courses taught by other people. So that was my big sort of turning point into what is now training for translators, is that I thought, okay, let me try to expand this into courses taught by other people to cover things that I can't teach. So a cautionary tale, I started so over ambitiously with that by teaching an 8-week course with 4 different topics and 4 instructors.
Oh my God, go big or go home. Holy cow.
Yes. Yeah. It was called translation workshop, French to English.
Wow.
It was a really good idea, except, and I had an excellent turnout for it. The class sold out in like less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I think I charged $525 for that. So it was 8 weeks long. So you're going to do 8 practice translations that are going to be individually reviewed. Again, we're emphasizing the highly detailed personal feedback from the expert instructor, not just theoretical information about what you should do. The instructor actually marks up your assignment and track changes and sends it back to you. And I think I charged $525 for that. And that was the move to Zoom.
Okay.
So I decided we're going to start these live sessions and I will record them, but I'm going to do the move to Zoom there.
Okay. And it sold out.
So
it sold out.
It sold out.
Yeah.
It sold out. Yeah, it sold out.
Yeah.
So Marcia wanted to know about certificates of completion. Yes, people love completion certificates. I only do them for my 4-week courses, not for like if I teach like these 1-session master classes that I teach, I do one of those every month. I don't do a certificate for that because it's too much work.
Yeah.
But for my 4-week courses, people get a certificate. Yeah. And Aaliyah wanted to know, how do I time them? I have a lot of participants in Europe and sometimes even Asia. So I try to do 12 noon New York time around either 11 a.m. or 12 noon Eastern time, because then in California it's about 8 a.m. and it's still doable for people in Europe. But that's a big concern for me because I have international participants. Right. If you don't have international participants, then you don't need to worry about that. But I do. I can't do it too late, or people in Europe don't participate.
Right. That's a matter of knowing your audience, you know.
Yeah. So after that translation workshop, French to English class, I was like, good idea, overly ambitious execution. And then I narrowed it down to just the 4-week courses that I still teach some of them, but now actually 50% at least are taught by other people. And since Jessica, who's on the session today, hosts the live sessions, I don't even attend the live sessions for those anymore. I just do the administrative aspects.
Yeah. So you're sending out your marketing emails, you're setting up the back end, that kind of thing.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And
another, go ahead.
I was just going to ask how people responded to that. Obviously, well, because you're still doing it. So you went to this live model, you opened it up, you've got more instructors coming in. So what happened at that point?
So the thing I did was, I think one thing that I did well was before I started any of those, I did a survey. I had maybe 1,000 or 1,500 people on my email list at that time. And I did a survey and said, I'm considering expanding to online courses taught by other people. What topics would you be the most interested in? And I got some really good feedback from those, from my email list on those, both topics that I had suggested that they said they were or weren't interested in, and then things that other people suggested that I hadn't even really thought of. Like, for example, the editing class, which is now super popular, was a suggestion from a subscriber.
So you gave people a multiple choice option saying, hey, here are some possibilities, but you also had an open-ended question saying, if you have other suggestions, submit them. Okay, got it.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is a great tip, by the way. That's people do that. They're like, I'm going to pick a course on a topic I'm interested in that I think will be interesting to people. But that's one of the
always ask your subscribers, you know, whether you're, you know, writing, nutrition, dog training, whatever you are, you know, always ask your subscribers, you know, if they have ideas for courses that you haven't thought of. And then and I don't know how many people on the session today are interested in their own stuff versus really creating like an online training platform for their industry. But one thing I feel like also has been really critical for me is I pay my instructors really, really well. That sounds crazy, but I think, again, it's hard to establish, like, I basically want to have the reputation that people have only ever heard good things about my classes. So again, to put some numbers on it, my instructors get paid $255 per student for each student who takes the class. So I make about $100 and they make $255.
Wow.
Whereas if you're teaching, but the thing is, I'm still making really about the same hourly rate that I would translating by doing that.
And how big are your courses average right now? How many people?
Usually 15. Okay. Yeah, usually 15 people. Yeah. But the thing is that I think that also drives demand for the classes I teach
Totally.
where I make all the money.
Yeah.
So just as an example, I just did 2 master classes of a presentation I had already prepared. So all I had to do was go through, I had already taught this same presentation at a conference, but I offered it on my own as a master class. And I sold it out twice to 30 people each, paying $75. So I basically made almost $5,000 for less than 10 hours of work.
Wow.
So the thing is that having that excellent reputation, and part of the way that I get there is by paying my instructors really, really well. And then they don't want to go teach elsewhere.
Right. So they don't get poached.
Because
yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't worry about them being poached
Yeah.
because I'm not paying them a flat rate of $1,500
Right.
while they're sitting there thinking, so the person organizing this class is making $3,500 and I'm making $1,500. Sorry, my foster kitten is climbing on the computer monitor.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I know. Life I usually work at a co-working office that looks a little more professional, but in the time of Corona, we have things like foster kittens on the monitor. So I think going but I think the nugget of truth there for all of your attendees is I feel like there's so much at the lower end of the market in online courses that for me, it has worked really well to aim for the higher end of the market.
Right. And that means you need really good instructors.
Right. Yeah. And that if you're going to hire other people to teach for you, you need to have total confidence in them. And you need, my goal when I came up with the $255 per student was for them to be making the same hourly rate that they would doing their real job.
Right.
So they're not, I always tell people, I don't want you doing this as a labor of love.
Right.
I want you doing this because you're making the same hourly rate that you would when you're doing your regular job.
And that includes the time that they spend giving the personalized feedback. You still have people submitting assignments and stuff like that. And you calculated all of that and said, I'm factoring that in and to figure out your hourly rate.
Yeah,
okay.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. So now you have training for translators. You run about how many courses a year?
So, every year is different because this year, with the pandemic, I've had everything is selling out because people are stuck at home. I'm offering courses as fast as I can get them up there because people are stuck at home and most translators' work has not been affected that much. So they still have money.
Wow.
Last year, I know for sure it was about 280 people participated in my actual courses, but that doesn't, some things I don't really keep track of. Like if I do a one-time free webinar, I don't count those as course participants. Because the other thing that I offer now too, I don't know if we want to talk about this, is challenge groups.
I do actually. And we're rapidly running out of time, but seriously, we could go on all day. But let's talk about it because it was another flavor of offering that you put into the mix that was lower priced and is still working beautifully and making lots of money for you. So let's talk about it. What does that look like?
Yeah. So about a year ago, I thought, so how it started out was that I saw this trend, I think on freelance writer blogs, that a lot of people do this March marketing challenge. Maybe because it's alliterative or because, writers don't really watch the March Madness basketball tournament. I don't know. One of the two. Translators don't either. Not that many. So I thought, what about a March Marketing Madness challenge group? And I sort of theorized because I think, honestly, I have not had a ton of success converting people who participate in a free offering into paid participants because I think people in a free offering are looking for free. Fair enough. Like a lot of people do a free offering because their budget is nothing. And that's okay. Like when I started out as a translator, my professional development budget was nothing. And so I only participated in free stuff too. But I theorized, which has been true, that it would be easier to convert people. And I hate that word because it makes, it sound more commoditized than I want to, but that people who participated in a moderately priced offering would be more likely to become repeat customers either in more moderately priced offerings or in something higher priced.
Yep.
And that has turned out to be true. So the first challenge group was March Marketing Madness. I believe I charged $75 and got 50 participants in that. And it was also really fun. I run that on Slack.
Yeah.
So talking about tech tools, again, I don't use a paid platform for that. And I find if you're going to try to get people to do one participatory platform, I really like Slack because I think it combines the personal features of something like Facebook without the invasiveness. My participants will not do a Facebook group. They are, again, you got to know your audience, but my participants are very, very, very anti-Facebook. And I like Slack a lot. And the other thing is Slack doesn't connect to anything else. And so when you're done with the class, you just delete the app or cancel your account on the web browser and you're done with it. It's not like Facebook that follows you for the rest of your life.
And even with these bigger challenges, you mentioned this 900-person class that you did, which I assume was mostly on Slack. You're still able to use a free version of Slack, or have you had to upgrade?
So Slack's free for 10,000 messages. That's the cutoff. And I believe, so Sarah, March Marketing Madness was the first challenge group that I ever taught. And I think, if your audience does anything with marketing, I think like March Marketing thing is fun because it seems to be sort of trendy. So for that, I would send out an email on MailChimp every day. And I did a short motivational video, like literally 2-minute motivational video that was on like allowing yourself to fail, learning from your mistakes, marketing things that you can do in 5 minutes. So I would do that. And then every day had a challenge. So, the day 1 challenge was like nudge a dormant client. The day 2 challenge was, make a custom banner for your LinkedIn profile if you don't have one already. That's what I did for all of that.
And that was every weekday. And then if I remember correctly, you were able to reuse those videos the following year when you ran the challenge again.
And I now have another instructor who teaches a search engine optimization challenge for me. I had somebody do a task management challenge. A translator I work with who's also a productivity consultant did a task management challenge. So I find personally, again, I'm not a huge proponent of trying to attract people to your paid offerings by first having a free offering, because I find Eve just commented too. She did the second language challenge where we had and it was super successful that Eve taught that for me, where people did a maintaining their second language challenge where every day was a different, read a poem out loud in your other language or listen to a podcast. Anyway.
Very specific.
I find
that's great though.
People who are attracted to free tend to stick with free. And that if you want to build up a line of paid offerings, you're better off offering something for $50. Think of approach it from the reverse standpoint, not how do I convince someone from a paid webinar to spend $300 on an online course? A lot of them aren't going to.
Now, I want to interject. That's the only thing you've said so far that I do disagree with, because there are different approaches to this.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I want to point out that much of your free offerings are your incredible blog posts. So
true. That's okay. You're right about that.
Yeah, if you use it as part of a content marketing strategy, like a webinar like this, where you're giving free information, it is absolutely possible to convert people over to paid, but it's got to be done in a smart way. So I disagree with you, because you got lots of free offerings out there. You just don't necessarily know them. Talk about them because you're modest.
Social
media.
That's why you're a social media.
So
because
not to disagree, but I'm going to disagree on that
point. But the thing what I mean is, for example, when I did that, so as at the start of the pandemic, when I thought like all of us, like, what can I do to contribute something to the world in the pandemic, that I thought I'll offer a MOOC style session of my Getting Started as a Freelance Translator course. So I did that. It was completely free. 900 people signed up. And of the people who filled out the survey at the end, the vast majority said they only participated because it was free. That even if I had charged, $50, they wouldn't have participated.
Okay. But you
So
got 900
yeah,
people signed up. I'm curious too if many of those were new people to you, because that helps you build your list, which we haven't.
nearly
Yeah,
all.
there you go. So
Yeah.
that may still pay off for you, because you still send lots of great content. You said,
Yep.
new blog posts, you have all this good stuff out there. So those people may still convert. It just may be
Yep.
further down the line. So that brings us to, because we're at 11:04 right here, Mountain Time. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about marketing. One of the things that I think is really cool about your approach is you have an email list that you contact regularly of, you said 2,500 people right now. And you're
actually, it's up to be fair, it's up to 3,400 because of that move.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And what I like about your approach is that it is very direct. Now, and I want to point out to everybody, this is one potential approach. I'm a copywriter, of course, so I'm all about things like storytelling and stuff like that. But Corinne takes a really direct approach. For example, if she's got a new, March Madness, kind of challenge coming up, it will say in the subject line, March Madness challenge, or online courses closing, last chance to do online course. And it says right at the top, like, here's what I'm offering. And then you probably put other content and things like that in it, but you're extremely direct about that. You do not beat around the bush, and it clearly works for you. So I just want to point this out as an option for people. It is not the only option, but it is one of them.
I mean, my observation is people like to know when they're being sold to.
Yeah.
Or my audience likes to know when they're being sold to. So my posts are either informational content where the subject line says 4 tips for optimizing your LinkedIn headline to get more clients on LinkedIn, or it says new online course, editing and proofreading for into English translators.
And that's a paid offering.
For my people are completely allergic to icky sale, what they perceive as like icky sales tactics. And so I think translators sort of, sleaze tolerance is like really pretty close to zero. And so I think I always try to make it very, very clear when I am selling something. And I say, as you said, I even say in the subject line, basically, the reason that I'm contacting you is because I have this class you might want to sign up for.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. And how would you say you get most of your clients for your online courses now? Not your translation clients, but the people, your students. How do you get your students?
Yep. Because they originally read my blog, then they signed up for my email list.
Yep. Okay. Very interesting. So the foundation of your marketing is your blog.
Basically.
Yeah. How much blogging do you currently do?
Not as much as I should. I mean, I aim for once a week. And so for a while, when I had a lot of energy, I was doing a different informational post every week to my blog and my email list. I would have like content only for my email list. But now I don't really do that as much. I'd say I probably post 3 times a month to my blog. And another thing that I do that works really well for me is sometimes I'll send out really, really short stuff to my email list that instead of, a 1,000-word thing that has everything you ever wanted to know about, Instagram for translators, I'll just say, really short tip. If you haven't customized your LinkedIn profile URL, here's the link on how to do it. It'll take you 5 minutes, makes your profile look more professional. Do it today.
Got it. And you were doing videos for a little while on Monday mornings too, like little mindset, something like that.
So I have this occasional series called Mindset Mondays. And I think, another sort of overarching idea I would say to people is like, mix it up, like I do some video, I do some sort of long form posts to my email list. I do some sort of short form posts, and I can see in the MailChimp statistics, different people respond to those, more enthusiastically or not. Some people hate videos, some people love it. So I think, mixing it up is a really good idea.
Okay. Got it. So, and I want to point out again, like you have this huge archive of blog posts. Doesn't have to be huge, but yours happens to be huge because you've been blogging for so long, and people are often finding you through search, and then they come and they join your list, and you probably like I'm curious if you have something free that you're giving away on your list, or you don't at all. You're just like, stay in touch with me. Like you're just
I'm so bad about
no,
that stuff.
no, not at all. I'm not going to tisk tisk.
No.
Yeah.
So again, but I think like my audience,
Yeah.
if they see a pop-up
Yeah.
with get a free ebook
Yeah.
about, 10 ways to make $1 million as a translator, they're like, get me out of here. I can't stand this.
Yeah.
My audience,
Yeah.
the little text box that says, for weekly updates on how to become a better translator, put your email address in here.
Yeah.
They're all about that.
Okay, but you do have a benefit there in your headline. So it's like how to become a better translator, or how to how to build your translation business, etc. Okay, got it. So that's your marketing. So let me look at my list of stuff I was going to ask you, because I think we've hit on most of it. But okay, you and I talked when we were originally talking about this class for people who are just starting out. So clearly you're much more advanced in this. You've now got an online training platform. You've got a suite of courses. For people who are starting out, let's talk about your minimum viable product advice for people. And we're going to get to questions in just a second. And actually, do you have a hard stop at 11:15?
Nope.
Or can you keep going? Nope. Okay. I'm going to hang with us because we're getting tons of questions coming in and I want to address all those.
Sure.
But talk to me about that, because we want to give some really targeted advice for the people who are like, I don't have an online course. I don't know what to do, so talk to me about that MVP kind of thing.
Yep. So, I think the minimum viable product approach has worked really well for me because it keeps my fixed costs very low. So I feel like, when I talk to other people who are like, I already spent, $1,000 because I got a membership to Teachable.
Oop. I think we've lost Corinne, unfortunately. So let's go back to minimum viable product. And I want you to define what that is for people who don't know that term.
So minimum viable product gets sort of a bad rap as like, here's this thing I threw together in 5 minutes. But what I mean is, before, especially if you're thinking about launching an online course, before you spend tons of money on a super fancy website, a membership to an online course platform, all kinds of things like that.
Designer.
Right.
Designer, I saw people. Yeah.
What could I offer with what I have now? Like using the existing technology that I have now, what could I offer? And I think the main thing is it has to look professional. Like there are lots of people out there charging money, I think, for stuff that is not professional, that your stuff really, really needs to look professional. But there, as I've shown you, there's a lot you can do with a Zoom account and email.
Yes.
So just as an example, and I think I am not at all opposed to spending money on things that make my courses look more professional and give people a better experience. So, again, I think there are a lot of people who are sort of allergic to the idea of spending money on anything, like if it costs money, I'm not going to do it. But think, what could I do with a basic Zoom account, and email? And I think what I mean by minimum viable product is more like, don't invest tons of money in stuff that may or may not be useful to you and that takes a lot of time to learn how to use and a lot of time to manage when it's up and running. That you're like, I made all these new lessons, but now I have to upload them into WP courseware. And that's what's driving me crazy.
Or I have to re-record them. I know a Facebook ads expert, and she goes ballistic every time they make a change to Facebook, because she's like, I now have to start from scratch with all of the recordings that I did. And it's expensive and time consuming.
Correct. Like they're not compatible anymore with the new, with the new format. And I think, and I am also not a huge proponent of putting tons of content out there on a platform like Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or anything like that, because I think what you really want to do is attract people to your own website and get them to sign up for your email list. And again, I know that sounds like 1999, but in my experience, you need to have those people's contact information, because if you use an algorithmic platform like Facebook or LinkedIn that isn't showing your post to everyone who is subscribed to your page or who is a fan of it or whatever, you're putting a lot of time into something that not all of those people are going to end up seeing. Whereas when you email it to them, if they want to look at it, they will.
Right, right. And it's very direct. I think it's a good idea to use social media as an engine to drive people toward your website and your list, but it shouldn't be
do that a lot.
That you do. Yeah. Clients come to me and say, I've got a Facebook group of 10,000 people and 0 people on my list. And it just makes me wince because they've built their whole marketing platform on Facebook. And then Facebook is totally like, it's at their whim, whether or not my client's posts even get showed to their 10,000 person group. So it's, build your own thing, make it your own asset, your own website on your own domain, and your own list, because that's such a crucial part of this, even though it sounds very 1990s, like you said.
And I find you can do a lot with Zoom and email. And again, those of you, I mean, maybe if you're teaching a course for people who are more tech savvy, they might be turned off by the lower tech aspects of that. But for my participants, that is a selling point. To say, that's all I really use is email and Zoom. I even make the Slack group optional. Some of my people can't figure out the Slack group. It's too overwhelming for them. And so I tell them that's okay. If you don't want to be on the Slack group, you can just email the instructor.
Okay. Got it. That's fabulous. So your approach is basically use the tools you have, get something out quickly. Don't overthink it.
Well, more doing, less overthinking. So I think my only fear when I talk about my approach is that sometimes I'm afraid that it sounds like, just throw the spaghetti against the wall and people will come. And what I mean is put more thought into the content, who it could be useful to, and what people are willing to pay money for, and less overthinking into, how am I going to promote this on Instagram and what online course platform am I going to use?
And the time and energy spent setting up things like Teachable, and then you're paying $100 a month to keep your course live and stuff like that. So, all right. So you have this fast and simple way that you recommend for people. And I think one could argue that a lot of entrepreneurs could take this approach, and a lot of freelancers as well. If you want to add an online course offering, the key thing is that you are familiar with your audience, do your surveys, do your research, and figure out something that they're going to be really interested in. So
and I think if I was going to give people advice on something that they should start with, do a very specific thing that you have struggled with and mastered in your business. So for example, for you, Beth, I would say write a class on how to write a long form sales letter, for our nutritionist, maybe how to eat healthy when you're on the road. Because I think when people see in the course something that they could immediately apply to a challenge that they struggle with, that is what motivates people to sign up, is when they think, oh my gosh, if this could solve my problem, And I think another thing for right now, I know when we were talking a little bit beforehand about what we might talk about, that you put a question in there about how is all this affected by the pandemic? So as if through some force of the universe, like in about February. So I listened to this podcast that's called The Freelancers Show, and it's people totally unlike us. It's a bunch of IT guys who are freelance programmers and software trainers. Sitting around talking about their freelance businesses, but I've really benefited from it because it's a totally different perspective on a similar business. So presciently, they did an episode in February, I think, or maybe January, probably February, on freelancing during a recession. How to recession-proof your freelance business. And one of the things they said was, a lot of them have been doing this a long time, so they freelanced through the 2008 recession. And one of them said, business-to-consumer offerings, especially training, tend to thrive in a recession because people want to make themselves as marketable as possible for the work that there is. Or they think about changing careers completely.
Yeah.
That it's a time when professional development and training tends to really thrive. And I have found that during the coronavirus pandemic to be true, 100 times over. That like my courses usually, the signups usually do pretty well, but this is the first time I've had in the whole time I've been doing online courses that everything is sold out.
That's amazing.
That this month I offered 2 master classes and 2 4-week courses, and all 4 of those sold out. So I think that's another thing to think of right now, that if you've sort of had this idea in your head for a while, that I think now could be a good time to go for it, because things like online training really thrive in a down economy.
Yeah, and people are showing up because they are stuck in the house.
Yes.
And on a free webinar like this, I get about 1/3 of the people who actually sign up for the webinar to actually show up live. And since the pandemic hit, it's half for me, which is incredible. And so people are live classes are something that people are definitely interested in right now.
Because it breaks up the day.
Exactly. It brings the outside world into your home, in a way that people desperately need. So, all right, I'm going to pivot and use our last 10 minutes to get some questions from Jessica, because I see them scrolling by and I want to try to get to as many as we can. Really quick, let's tell people where to find you online. I'm at bethhayden.com. I do copywriting. I do content marketing. If you want to work with me one-on-one, you can absolutely do that. And you can check out the digital course. Jessica, if you could put that masterclass link one more time in the chat for us. So it's all about creating your own digital assets to help you get more clients for your freelancing business. So go ahead and put that in the chat. That's where you can find me. Tell people where they can find you and your various platforms.
Yeah, so my website is trainingfortranslators.com. And I mean, it's probably, you could look at how I run my stuff, but it's probably only interesting if you're a translator.
It's interesting, actually, even from just an entrepreneurial point of view.
So trainingfortranslators.com. And then I guess the other thing I use quite a bit, thanks, Jessica. She just put it in the chat. I'm a pretty enthusiastic Twitter user, and I'm there at Corinne McKay, 1 R, 2 N's.
Got it. Okay. And the Thoughts on Translation blog, it's all tied into Training for
It's just integrated. It's the blog feature on Training for Translators right now. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And we had somebody chime in and say it's interesting for interpreters too.
Oh, cool. Right. I just meant language person.
Yes.
That I don't know how interesting my blog is to a dog trainer, for example. If you're a language person.
But if you want to see great examples of content marketing, check it out. So, okay. So I realize, questions have been scrolling by. So Jessica, feed us some questions for Corinne.
Blogs. Do you both use comments on your blogs?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think I'll ever stop doing that, because it's such an important piece of it. And comments have dropped way down since the beginning of social media. And lots of people comment on Facebook if I share a link over there. But I'll always keep comments open on my blog. What do you do?
And Beth, I couldn't hear Jessica. I don't know if that was just me. I could hear obviously that she asked you the question about comments, but I couldn't hear her.
Oh, that's strange. Okay.
I'm not sure. Audience, could you hear Jessica?
Yeah, I could repeat her questions. I'm not sure what's going on with that.
So I'll answer that. Oh, you can hear her. It's just me then. All right. All right then.
All right.
So to Sarah's question, comments and how do you deal with snarky blog comments? I do have comments open on my website. I have moved them over the years to manual moderation, so nothing shows up. So like Becky, to your question about sales comments, I just trash them. They never appear on the blog because I have to manually approve everything. My personal technique with snarky people is a neutral 1-line response. Thanks. Interesting.
Yes.
Or interesting perspective.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, that's my 30-second answer. Everyone's got their own way of dealing with it. Engage with it. Don't engage with it. I just give literally 2 words. Interesting perspective. Thanks for your thoughts.
Yeah. And when people get really out of control and get abusive, you do not have to put that on your site.
No.
You do have the power to delete those comments and have them not show up. So there's a difference between somebody who just disagrees with you and made you so vehemently and abuse.
Right.
So okay. What else do we have, Jessica? I'm hoping Corinne can hear, but if not, we'll figure out a different way to do this. So what else you got?
Yeah, you can just repeat it.
What is different in a masterclass as opposed to other courses?
You got it?
I did.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Yeah, so what I call a masterclass is it's 2 to 3 hours long. It's on a very targeted topic. And honestly, one of the reasons that I use masterclass is to clarify that there's no sales pitch. Like I think a lot of times when people see webinar, that they think this is going to be part informational and part sales pitch.
Yeah.
And that's why I use it. But also they're 2 to 3 hours long. I think that
It's one time on a really specialized topic. Okay.
Correct.
As opposed to the rest of your higher end courses that are multi-part over about 4 weeks.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Got it. What else we got? What do you charge for a masterclass?
$75.
75. Okay. So the same price as your challenges.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. Jessica?
Low price. Speaking of prices.
Yeah, so I have, and again, maybe this is just me. So I offer the base price for my 4-week classes is $365. But I offer a larger discount to returning students than to new students because I like to incentivize people to keep taking more classes with me. And Sherry, to follow up on your question, do you think you shouldn't offer courses longer than 4 weeks? I would like to, but I find for my audience, they have a pretty steep drop off on attendance if the price is over about that $350 point. So, I mean, one way to think about it, and this is another like big picture thought I would put out to you guys is, again, approach it from the reverse. What could I offer that would be worth my time for, $350 or something like that? I've tried 6 and 8 week courses for $500, and the people who sign up for my courses are not super receptive for those. I only get a few participants, so that's why I don't do it.
So that's a breaking point for your clients, and it's really critical to figure out where that is.
Yeah.
I offer a number of master classes, and if you're signed up for this webinar, you will get any follow-up things like that. You can unsubscribe at any time, but most of my one-time master classes are $79. And then if I do something that's more like a 4-week class, it'll go up from there. But that seems to be under $100 for like a one-time thing is usually something that people can pull the trigger on without a whole lot of hesitation. So my master classes usually fill up, so including the digital products course that I'm offering.
Yeah.
So,
and Sarah, to answer your question about how many people, I usually take 30 people because again, my whole thing is personal attention. Like if people think they're going to get personal attention, I don't want 75 people on there because I really try to answer all the questions. And as you see today, like when people have a lot of questions, the Q&A can go on for a while. And that's one of the things that I guarantee for my master classes is that everybody's questions will get answered.
Brilliant. And you actually say that outright. Yeah. And actually, that's another question that we didn't cover. Sorry to pull away, but this is something I realized. You don't create super elaborate sales pages for your courses. You have a template that you use at this point, and it's sort of like, I'm going to follow this. It's a course description. Here's about the instructor, that kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And same thing when I send out emails to get people to sign up. I just say it. I just say what it is.
Yeah.
Training for Translators is offering a 4-week medical translation course taught by Michelle Hansen. Michelle's been a translator for over 20 years and has these certifications. If you'd like to sign up, here's the page. I mean, again, like everything else we've been talking about, all I can say is it works for me.
Yeah, exactly. And it works with some audiences and not others, because others would say, I'm turned off by the fact that you're giving me a sales pitch right off the bat. So this is a matter of really knowing your audience.
Or they think it sounds boring. I sell my classes in a very boring way.
I would say more direct, but I think it's fascinating that it has really worked for you. So, all right, Jessica, what else we got?
Communications and surveys, and you have individual conversations as well.
I send out a satisfaction survey at the end of every class. I just do it on SurveyMonkey. I have the free account because other than the MOOC class, I never have more than 100 participants, and you can do 100 responses to the free SurveyMonkey thing. And I usually ask, how satisfied on a scale of 1 to 5? One thing, and I don't know barely anything about doing surveys, but one thing you want to avoid is only having 3 options because it favors the option you want. So, for example, if you say, was this webinar too short, too long, or just right? It favors the answer just right Whereas a lot of people think, well, it was a little long,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
so that's why
Right.
I do scale of 1 to 5.
Okay.
So
Got it.
scale of 1 to 5,
Satisfaction.
yeah,
Yeah.
scale of 1 to
Okay.
5, how satisfied were you? Scale of 1 to 5, how much did this course improve your confidence in the skills that were taught in the course?
Okay.
What were your favorite aspects of the course? Do you have any suggestions for improvement? And would you like to provide any other feedback or a testimonial?
Yeah. Okay. Got it. The tool that she's recommending is called Survey Monkey, all one
Yeah.
word, and it's free if you're only doing 100 responses. So
Responses.
yeah, yeah. And so that's a generic follow-up form that you send to people regardless of what the topic is.
Right. I mean, I customize it for that class, but
Oh,
I
you
ask
do?
the same
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Got
ask
it.
the
The
same
template
questions.
you can reuse. Okay. Got
Correct.
it. All right. Jessica, what else?
You, and I believe this is marketing related, do you tailor things different to individuals versus businesses?
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't teach any
Yeah.
courses for businesses, so you should talk
Yeah,
about that, Beth.
yeah. I mean, the vast majority of my audience is small business owners. So it is a little bit different with regards to copywriting and communication. But I will say, even when you're talking to businesses, you're still talking to an individual. You still have to convince the one person who's getting your email that that they're going to get a benefit from signing up from your masterclass. So it is still individual to individual. So there's not as much difference between B2C and B2B as one might think, but that's a topic for another webinar. Let's touch on something else. Go ahead.
Both of you offered some information on platforms, but there are still a lot of questions in terms of specific platforms for a one-time webinar versus, sort of an ongoing course that you have. So if you have any additional details on that, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. So really, for presenting my sessions, I always use Zoom because I find that it has all the features I want for the live session and the recordings. I had to buy the extra storage capacity in Zoom because it doesn't give you that much storage capacity. But like I said, even when I used the 500-person Zoom account, it still worked quite well. And I use that for everything.
Yeah.
And then the only exception would be for my challenge groups. The people get the materials in an email and then they go on Slack to report what they did. So in the challenge group, part of the essence of the challenge group is that you're saying every day that you did the challenge. You're reporting on what you did. And they go on Slack to report what they did.
Yeah. Okay. And I use Demio for my larger webinars because some of my webinars I get 500 plus people who sign up. And what I find with Demio is that it has more of the features that I want for larger webinars. I'm able to customize the experience a bit more. It records automatically. People can just do one click and it opens up in a browser like this, which I like, but only for my larger webinars. For my small masterclasses, I use Zoom. I use the $15 a month Zoom account. And I still run everything off my WordPress blog. Like you'll see a replay page after this webinar is over. That's on a WordPress page. I use, YouTube to upload the video. I go cheap and simple when it comes to tools. Yeah.
And I want to say my Zoom account costs me about $60 a month. So I have the 100-person Zoom account with the extra storage capacity. And I want to say that that's about $60 a month. But for the amount I use it, I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love Zoom. Don't get me wrong. And honestly, I'm doing a trial run of Demio. I like it-ish. I'm curious what people's experience is. So if you want to get in touch with me offline and let me know, there are things I like and things I don't. But Zoom is fantastic for most things. Yeah, we had somebody mention another alternative to SurveyMonkey is Typeform, which I want to argue with you a little bit, Jennifer, because I think type forms are absolutely beautiful. And from a copywriting perspective, I find them a little bit unfriendly. Often type forms will throw up roadblocks in front of people that discourage them from actually completing the form. So it is okay to go simple. It's okay to go simple. And type form gives you more features that are really pretty, but they may actually get you fewer responses. So be careful with it. Don't overcomplicate it with type form.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
For how I use Slack, so I saw Marcia asked how I use Slack. So I use Slack as the discussion forum, Marcia. So for a long time, and again, talking about the platform transition, I used Google Groups. So I'd have a Google group for each class. But now I actually find if you don't use a Gmail account, Google Groups can be kind of irritating. I won't go into the, experiences I've had with that, but I'll just say, I feel like it's forcing you more and more to use Google Groups with a Gmail account. So Slack is the discussion forum that I use. So I'll create different channels like week 1 discussion, resources, introductions, week 2 discussion, things like that. And I find people are quite receptive to it. I don't really have people having major sign up problems. Like I had a lot of hassles getting people signed up to Google Groups, which sounds weird because they should be super simple, but they're not. And that Slack, it combines some of the like fun features of something like Facebook without the personal invasiveness.
Right. Yeah. And some people have political problems with Facebook these days. They don't want to be on the platform because I won't get into it, but you get the idea. All right. I've gone way over on time. So we got more questions coming in. If I didn't answer your question and we didn't get to it, please email me and we will try. We try our best to do that. So thank you so much, Corinne. We can find Corinne at trainingfortranslators.com. If you're a translator looking for improvement in marketing in your business or becoming a better translator, check her out. You can find me at bethhayden.com. And thank you, Jessica, for moderating. Let me know in email, just respond to any of my reminder webinars and let me know if this webinar was helpful for you. So Corinne, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was, thanks. And thanks to all the participants.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful week.
Bye.
Thanks.